Greetings and welcome to the Wealth Mindset. I am your host, JD Garnier, and you are listening to KKNOK 75 AM or 107.1 FM radio in New Orleans, or you're tuned into the Wealth Mindset Podcast. I hope you had a productive week in your wealth creation journey. And listen, as always, my goal is simple: to help you walk in wealth, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. To take the things that God has already given you and use those to create a life of purpose, so that wealth is more than just what you acquire. Wealth is who you become. You are the wealth, not your investments, not your real estate, not your business. You are the wealth. And before you have any of those things, you have a unique and specific set of talents, abilities, gifts, ideas, habits, disciplines, and inclinations that form the basis of any and everything that you do in life. And once you tap into that, you start your wealth creation journey. So I'm going to say it again. You are the wealth. First things first, please follow me on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, under JD Garnier or Garnier JD. You can also purchase my books, How to Sell When Your Clients Don't Look Like You, and The Art of Diversity Selling, directly from my website, www.jdgarnier.com. Please like, share, and follow me for updates. Now, today I want to talk about economic resilience. The Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun. And a lot of times people think that the things that we are facing, a lot of the economic challenges that we're dealing with, things like inflation, things like unemployment, things like national debt, terms like recession, every time those things come up, we tend to believe or feel like it's unprecedented, or the economic circumstances that we find ourselves in have not happened before. But in reality, economies go in cycles. And every 8 to 10 years, give or take a few, the economy goes through a cycle of peaks and a cycle of troughs. And in some of those years, there is abundance and money is free flowing and the unemployment rate is low and people are find it much, much easier to find employment or to start businesses or to do the things that they want to do. And then in other years, things change and economies go down, things start to slow, companies start to lay people off, things become more and more expensive. And it is this cycle that is really based on human nature and human emotion. Because what people don't understand when we talk about the economy, when we talk about economics, when we talk about markets and all of these things, economics is the study of how people interact with value. And so all of this stuff that we look at externally when it has to do with the economy is really based on us. It's based on our buying habits. It's based on the things that we consume, the things that we value, how we manage resources. All of it is based on us. Over 60% of the U.S. economy is based on personal consumption, what we buy and sell. And so because of that, it seems like it should be a natural consequence that in some years, collectively, we're going to buy more stuff. And in some years, we're going to buy less or need less things. And when those things slow down, as a collective, the economy slows with it. And there are implications and things that happen as a result of that. And so if you know and you understand this, then you don't become surprised when certain things happen, when you see certain headlines about a recession or economic slowdown or things like that, because you understand that this is a part of an economic cycle. But the question is, regardless of what stage or year or phase we are in the cycle, how do you position yourself to be economically resilient? How do you position yourself to take advantage of the economy, regardless of what situation that we're in. And a lot of that comes with the personal decisions that you make. But the two things that I want to focus on today when it comes to being economically resilient are two terms that I believe can help you manage risk. Because really, resilience is about managing risk. If everything that you think about and everything you do just works, you have nothing to worry about. But the fact of the matter is we live in the real world, and so things happen. Problems occur. You come into the world and have to face the world as it is. And sometimes that is not favorable. And so you have to be able to manage risk. And so in order to do that, you have to look at your value in terms of the things that you own. And I always talk about the way to build wealth is really simple, right? Wealth is really acquired or built in three simple ways. Number one, wealth is based on value. And in order for you to become wealthy, you have to own and control things of value. We call those things assets. And there's only three ways to acquire assets. You can buy assets, you can create assets, or you can become an asset. Those are the only three ways to build wealth. Buy assets, create assets, or become an asset. You buy assets when you take your discretionary income, the money that you make from working or whatever you do, and you buy things of value. You buy stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses, land, artwork, whatever it is that you decide to purchase that appreciates in value over time. Because when you buy and own those things change in value without the requirement of your time. And so it's very important to have a plan to buy assets. That's the first way to build wealth. The more assets you buy, the more things that you own that appreciate in value, the less time you have to spend working for money or trading your time for money. So the first thing is to buy assets. The second way to build wealth is to create assets. When you start a business, you are creating something of value. You are creating something in the marketplace that people see value in. And the more people see value in your product or service, the more value that you can add to the world, that increases your worth. More people purchase your product or service, and that increases your income. So when you start a business, you are creating an asset. That asset has value. That value at some point can be sold on the open market or passed down to your family members for them to enjoy. And so when you start a business, you are creating wealth. You are creating value. You are creating an asset. That's the second way to build wealth. Buy assets, create assets. And the last way to build wealth is to become an asset. All of us has some talent, some gift, some ability, some discipline, some inclination that adds value to the world. The more that you hone in on that, the more that you develop that, the more that you build on that, you become more of an asset. That's why education is so important, because foundationally, you want to have the basic things that allow you to compete in the world, right? I tell my kids the most two important things that they can ever learn to do are math and reading. If you can read, nobody can keep information from you. You can find out anything that you want to find out by simply being able to read. And when you can do math, you know how to solve problems, right? You know how to solve problems. Math is nothing but problem solving. And so if you can do those two things, there's nothing in the world that you can't do. But once you're able to do those fundamental foundational things, the goal is to build and develop yourself into something that creates value in the world, right? That could be a specialty, like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or whatever you choose to do. The more knowledge, the more wisdom, the more education, the more specialty that you develop and that you build, the more money you can require for your time. You are becoming an asset, right? For some people, that's entrepreneurship. For some people, that's a physical talent. But whatever it may be, the goal is to develop yourself into something that adds value into the world. Once you do that, you are becoming an asset. And so those are the only three ways to build wealth: buy assets, create assets, and become an asset. When economies change, the dynamics of all of those things change. When economies shift or change, that affects the value of the assets that you purchased. When economies change and the world changes, that affects your ability to create assets in the marketplace. Different businesses become more or less relevant depending on what's going on in the economic cycle. And lastly, depending on what's going on in the world, your ability or inability to become an asset is affected, right? The talents, abilities, and gifts that you have become more or less relevant depending on what's going on in the world. And so it's important to not only understand the economic cycle, but to become economically resilient. And that's what I want to talk about today. And there's two things that I want you to remember from this: asset allocation and asset location. Now, asset allocation has to do with how the assets that you own are allocated, right? I just talked about the three ways to acquire wealth: buy assets, create assets, or become an asset. Your asset allocation has to do with how your wealth is divided up into those different categories, right? If you are the wealth and you are the asset, but you don't own any assets, you haven't created anything, now everything is dependent upon you. And so the risk is, if something happens to you, your money stops, your income stops. There is a risk because everything is dependent upon your talents, abilities, and gifts, and you don't own any assets outside of yourself. If you start a business and that business becomes extremely successful, a multi-million-dollar business, but you take all of the capital, all of the earnings, and you reinvest into that business for it to grow, you have what we call a concentration. All of your wealth is concentrated in one asset. And so if something happens to that business, if the economy changes and that business is not as favorable, if you have competition that diminishes or depletes your revenue or your sales, that is a risk. If you own assets like stocks or bonds or real estate or businesses, and the economy changes, the value of those assets change with it. And so it is important to not only understand, but have a plan for managing your risk. Asset allocation. You always hear the term, don't keep all your eggs in one basket, right? And what that really fundamentally is saying is allocate your assets accordingly. Spread your wealth among a variety of different options so that you are not concentrated and you are able to reduce your risk. If you have all of your money in one particular security or one stock, and that something happens to that company, you can lose everything. A lot of people 25 years ago with Enron did that. They had all of their wealth in their company stock because they believed in that company, and that company did really well until it didn't. And when they went bankrupt, those people lost everything. And so asset allocation is the idea of allocating or spreading your wealth out among different assets. This is extremely important in being economically resilient, because in the economic cycle, different assets perform differently throughout the cycle, right? When everything is growing and everything is booming and money is free flowing, some assets perform very well in that circumstance. And you can get extremely great returns. Things can go really, really well. Other assets, on the other hand, may not be able to take advantage of that growth because they're more conservative in nature, right? But when things change, that safety, that conservation may become more valuable, may become more in demand. And if you own that prior to, then now those things increase in value. And so your ultimate goal, without me getting too complicated, is to spread your wealth among a variety of assets. If you can have a plan to do that, you can be economically resilient and you can find yourself increasing in wealth even when the economy is not as great, even when things are not as favorable, because you own a variety of different assets that perform differently in different environments, in different circumstances. You don't have everything in your business. You don't have everything in one or two different stocks. You don't have everything in real estate, right? You have divided your assets accordingly. This is extremely, extremely important in being able to weather difficult times. Because if you depend on one thing to provide everything that you need, you're putting yourself at risk. Because what if it doesn't? And so asset allocation is very important. The next concept that I want you to remember is asset location. Where are your assets held? Right? A lot of times people don't really think about or talk about this. And then I meet people and they have a lot of assets, but it's not structured properly. They aren't held properly, right? They own a business, but the business is in their name. They own a lot of investments, but all of those investments are in a retirement account, right? They don't understand the importance of asset location. Where your assets are located determines, number one, how they are protected, and number two, how they are taxed. Number one, you want to determine how your assets are protected. If everything that you own is in your name and somebody sues you, they can take everything that's in your name. If everything that you own is in cash or liquid, you're not getting any return on your investment. If everything that you own is concentrated in a business, you don't have any diversification. If everything that you own is tied up into your retirement accounts, now you have no short-term liquidity, and everything that you own is subject to penalties and potential taxes. And so asset location is understanding the ownership dynamic of the assets that you control. I know people say the term all the time, right? Own nothing and control everything. And really what they're talking about is structuring your assets or making sure that your assets are located in a way that protects you and gives you the most advantage or benefit from a tax and business perspective, right? How are your assets located? What is the ownership of the things that you have? If you own a business, is it in the right type of entity or structure? Right? This is why you need professionals, right? This is why you want to have a relationship with an attorney, with a CPA, with a wealth manager like myself, so that they can help you determine what is the best location for your assets. Is this the best type of business entity? Should you have a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC, right? What are the protections of each, for business owners, right? If you do have investments, how much of your investment should be in retirement accounts? And what are the tax implications of that? How much should be in accounts just in your name, right? Does it make sense for you to own some type of trust or entity that also holds those assets, right? All of this stuff are things that are important when it comes to asset location, because having assets located in the wrong way can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars in penalties, in taxes, in lawsuits, or whatever you can think of. And so the second way to become economically resilient is having the right structure for the things that you own. If you don't have the right structure, you can have millions of dollars available to you. But now those millions of dollars are at risk because they are not structured or located properly. This is extremely important to be able to understand. And the simple way that I break it down to clients is that you want to think about your wealth in three phases, right? Short term, mid-term, and long term. Your short-term wealth is your liquidity. That's what I call your reach out and touch money. Money that you can put your hands on very, very quickly. Money that you can convert to cash very quickly if something happens, if an emergency happens. Typically, your short-term money is earmarked to something that you're going to use within the next 12 months, right? Anything above your emergency funds, that's money you're going to use for the next 12 months. Your midterm money is money that is earmarked for something that you have a goal for the next 5 years, right? That could be starting a business. That could be paying for your kids' college. That could be buying a home. That could be making some other type of investment that you're accumulating wealth and resources for. That money should be handled, should be titled, should be invested differently than your short-term money because the implications are different. The goal is different. And lastly, your long-term wealth, that's money that you don't even want to think about or touch for the next 10 to 20 years. That's money that you want to be able to grow. You want to be able to take advantage of full economic cycles and take the benefit of growth for the long term. Those assets should be titled, should be structured differently than your midterm wealth and your short-term wealth. But the ultimate goal is asset location. Where are your assets located? How are they owned? How are they structured? This is going to protect you in a changing environment. And so I want you to remember those two terms, asset allocation and asset location. Because we cannot control economies. We cannot control when the economic cycle decides to manifest itself. We can't control when there is a recession and when there is growth and appreciation, but we can take advantage of it. And if you're not positioned the right way, if you have not planned the right way, you're not going to be in a position to take advantage of it. And one of my favorite quotes by one of the wealthiest men to ever live, Warren Buffett, is, when others are greedy, be fearful. And when others are fearful, be greedy. And this has to do with your mindset and how you decide to manage and to grow your wealth, regardless of the circumstances that are going on around the world. But you have to pay attention to those circumstances to give you some perspective. And so I hope that everybody took this message to heart and understands that economic resilience is on you. The world is changing. I hope that we're ready for that. The world is absolutely changing. Technology is moving at a pace faster than I think any of us can grasp. And what I'm fearful of is that a lot of us are not going to be ready for it. A lot of us are not going to be ready for it because unfortunately, we're too consumed in what's going on in our daily lives to really pay attention to what's going on. And that's why I always say we have to be connected to who we are, right? So that we can look above and beyond just our circumstances. And I'm going to leave you with this. There is no plan B. You can't quit. There is no plan B. There may be strategy B. There may be tactic B, but the plan is the plan. The thing that you came here to do, you came here to do. Period. The plan is the plan. You do what you do because your plan is your purpose. And if you are living in your purpose, it doesn't matter how many times you fail. It doesn't matter how many times the economy changes. It doesn't matter if we are in a recession. If you are living in your purpose, you will fail forward towards that purpose. You will fail forward towards the things that you came here to do. You will fail forward towards God's original instruction in your life. The plan is the plan. There's nothing else that is going to fulfill you. There's nothing else that's going to change your circumstances except living in your purpose. Period. You are the wealth. Rich is not wealth. You can get rich accidentally. You can go viral and get rich. You can be successful and make good decisions and be rich, but it's just money. It is disconnected from who you are because it is just money. It is just an exchange of time for money. And then once you stop giving your time, the money stops. And so rich is not wealth. You can be rich and not be wealthy. You can be so good at what you do that somebody gives you millions of dollars and you can get rich. But as long as you have to trade your time, you cannot get wealthy. But the goal is not to get rich. The goal is to build wealth. Wealth is the separation of time and money. You become wealthy when your resources, when your wisdom, when your income, when your money increases without the requirement of your time. And just like you can be rich without being wealthy, you can be wealthy without having to be rich. You can be wealthy without having to be rich. But you only become wealthy when you truthfully understand and follow your purpose. The plan is the plan. There is no plan B. God called you to do something. He called you to do something. That thing is not a job. Your purpose is not your profession. Your purpose is not your position. Your purpose is not your paycheck. Your purpose has more to do with, nothing to do with how much you earn. It is not your job title. It is an original instruction. The fact of the matter is that 99.99999% of human DNA is exactly the same. 99.999% of our DNA is just like every other person on earth. There's only about 0.00000, I don't know how many zeros, 0.001% of our DNA that separates us from everybody else. That 0.0001 is ingrained in our genetic code. And is in that minute, that inkling of a thing that gives us the way we look, the way we think, the way we talk, the way we act, the way we react, the ideas that we have, that little thing is our essence. That is the thing that makes us different from every other person on this earth. That's the thing that gives you your talents, your abilities, and your gifts. And it is in that inkling of a thing where your purpose lies. God gave you an instruction. He gave you an original instruction. Your purpose is God's original instruction in your life. He gave it to you. He didn't give it to anybody else. He gave it to you in that way, in that manner. Nobody else can do what you do. Nobody else can say it the way you say it. Nobody came up with that idea. Nobody can manifest it in the way that you do it. You are the one that can make this happen, and nobody else can do it. Your purpose is God's original instruction in your life. He called you to do something. He called you to lead. He called you to teach. He called you to build. He called you to create. He called you to love. He called you to nurture. He called you to entertain. He called you to encourage. He called you to motivate. He called you to do something with your life, and everything that you do has to be connected to that thing. That's your purpose. If your purpose is to lead, you're going to find yourself leading in all aspects of your life. You're going to find yourself leading on a job. You're going to naturally find yourself leading in church. You are going to galvanize towards leadership. He called you to lead, period. If he called you to build, you are going to find yourself coming up with ideas on how to build, on what to build. You are going to naturally position yourself in life to build something. What that thing is, I don't know. Maybe you don't know. That's why you have to fail forward. That's why the plan is the plan. Because you have to continue to develop yourself throughout life to fail forward and let God lead you towards where your talents, abilities, and gifts are going to serve the best, where your original instruction is going to have the biggest impact on this world. But the plan is the plan. And so when you're going through life, you're going to fail. You're going to try something else. You might fail at that. Then you try something else. You might fail at that. And then you may decide, I want to get better at that. And then you develop yourself. And then you may fail again, but you keep reaching, you keep jumping, you keep grasping for things that you can't touch until you develop your mind, your body, and your spirit. And now you're getting it. It's well within your grasp. But you don't get to that point if you keep switching up, if you keep changing, because the plan is the plan. It is God's original instruction in your life. Wealth Mindset, JD Garnier.